Example of this is how Trump has treated BRICS, the Global South-led organization that now represents the majority of the planet. Trump sees BRICS as a major threat to U.S. global dominance, and in particular, the dominance of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. Trump has openly threatened members of BRICS to try to stop them from seeking alternatives to the U.S. dollar.
BRICS was set up to hurt us. BRICS was set up to degenerate our dollar and take our dollar as the standard, take it off as the standard. And that's okay if they want to play that game, but I can play that game too. So anybody that's in BRICS is getting a 10% charge.
Is that immediate, sir? Or is
that pretty soon.
If they engage in some behavior?
Well, if they're a member of BRICS, they're going to have to pay 10% tariff. Just for that one thing. And they won't be a member long.
But ironically, Trump's attacks on BRICS countries have only strengthened BRICS and encouraged more and more countries across the global south to join BRICS. So Trump has been attacking Brazil and its president Lula da Silva, imposing 50% tariffs on Brazil. This has only pushed Brazil even closer to China. And now President Lula is publicly calling for more and more countries to seek alternatives to the US dollar. So Trump's attacks are backfiring. And today I'm going to talk about the situation in India, which is the I in BRICS. For years, the US government has pursued a strategy of trying to ally with India against China as part of an attempt to divide BRICS to isolate Beijing. And India was gradually moving closer to the US, but now Donald Trump has been attacking India, and Trump imposed 50% tariffs on India, which is one of the highest tariff rates in the entire world. Now, Trump is very arrogant, and he thinks that India has no other option but to go along with whatever the US wants. But we're in an increasingly multipolar world, and India does have other options. And immediately in response to Trump's very aggressive tariffs, what did India do? It reached out to China with an olive branch, and now New Delhi and Beijing have been improving their relations. So Trump is actually pushing India and China closer together, which again is the exact opposite of the strategy that the US government has been pursuing for well over a decade. And Trump himself, during his first term as US president from 2017 to 2021, had also been trying to pull India away from BRICS to improve relations with India. And hawkish neoconservative think tanks in Washington, D.C. have been saying very clearly that India and the US need to work together to combat China. The US managed to even bring India into the so-called Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is a group with the US, Japan, Australia, and India. And it was well known that the US brought together this group known as the Quad in order to try to isolate and weaken China in the Pacific region. But Trump's tariffs are undoing all of these efforts. So today I'm going to explain the complex geopolitical relations between the US and India, India and China, India and Russia, and the relations within BRICS itself. But before I do that, I want to explain what I think Trump is trying to do with these massive 50% tariffs that he has imposed on India. Now, Trump initially threatened 25% tariffs on India, and then he imposed another 25%, which he claimed was because India is buying oil from Russia, and he gave India 20 days to come to an agreement with the US in order to avoid these 50% tariffs. Then, bizarrely, the Trump administration threatened to impose even more tariffs and potentially sanctions on India if Trump's talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin, which are being held in Alaska, were not successful. So what's going on here? What role does Russia play in this? Honestly, I think Trump is using India's purchases of oil from Russia as an excuse. This is not really about Russia. Trump wants to justify very high tariffs on India in order to force India to come to the negotiating table to sign an unfair agreement that benefits the US at the expense of India. This is what the US did to Europe. The European Union agreed to sign an agreement with the US in which the EU accepted 15% US tariffs on European exports to the US, while the EU will not impose any tariffs on US goods. So this is an extremely unfair agreement that benefits the US at the expense of Europe.
I have a question for the EU Commission President. What are the US concessions? What is the US giving up in the deal, if anything?
So the starting point was an imbalance, a surplus on our side and a deficit on the US side. And we wanted to rebalance the trade relation.
And Trump thinks that he can force India to do the exact same thing. But India's foreign policy is much more independent than that of Europe. Now, it is true that India has become a major purchaser of Russian oil. And this is